Welcome back to Process Cast with Mark Anderson and Samantha Blake, your go-to podcast for insights into business process management and the technologies transforming the way we work. In this episode, Samantha and Mark dive into a business process you can import into your HEFLO account for free. Click the link in the description to get it.
All right, so you've shared some really fascinating stuff with us about how those IT environments handle updates and all the changes they have to make. We've got like this BPMN 2.0 process model, the one that outlines the whole ITIL Change Management life cycle.
Yeah.
Pretty dense stuff. So what we're going to try to do today is break this down, make it make sense, and get a clear idea of how they manage these modifications.
Yeah.
From like the initial, hey, let's change this thing, all the way to that final review.
Our goal.
To give you a good grasp of this whole process without drowning you in super technical details, think of this like your crash course in, being in the know about this super important part of how IT works.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's really interesting here is that this ITIL framework gives this really structured approach to something that, let's face it, could easily become a complete mess.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just about throwing updates around willy-nilly.
Right.
There's a specific path laid out for every single change. And if you understand that path, that's really the key to keeping your whole IT environment stable.
Okay, so let's dive right in. So the first thing we see is this thing called a request for change, or as they like to call it, an RFC.
Yeah.
What kicks one of these things off?
Yeah.
And who can actually submit it? Like, who has the power to say, hey, let's change this?
That's a good question. So it starts when someone realizes there's a need for a change, right?
Makes sense.
And the material we have suggests it can come from pretty much anyone who touches the IT environment. Could be a user who's having a problem, or maybe a system that's like, uh-oh, something's not right here.
Right.
Or even a technician who sees a way to make things better.
Interesting.
So it's not just the IT guys sitting in a room thinking up changes all day long.
So they've noticed something needs to change?
Uh-huh.
Where do these requests actually come from? Like, what kind of situations trigger an RFC?
Well, the document gives a few common examples. You often see an RFC come up after an incident's been resolved,
right.
Like something breaks and then they have to figure out how to fix it permanently.
Yeah.
It could also come out of a problem investigation, where they're trying to get to the root of those recurring issues. And service improvement plans, those are a big driver too.
Okay.
That's all about proactively making IT services better. So it's this mix of reacting to problems and actively looking for ways to make things better.
Okay, so someone spotted that a change needs to be made. They figured out why. Now they've got to actually put together this RFC.
Right.
What are the must-have pieces of info they need to include? It seems like the more detail they pack into that initial request, the smoother things will go later on, right?
Well, oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The quality of that initial request is huge. It's really important for change management to work well. So there are several key things that the document lays out that should be there. First off, a super clear description of the change. What exactly are they proposing to change? And then there's the why are we doing this part?
The justification.
Yeah, the justification, the business reason behind it.
Right, right.
What problem is this going to solve? Or what good thing will happen because of it?
Yeah.
They also need to think about, okay, who or what might this affect, the potential impacts.
Makes sense.
A proposed schedule or when they'd like to see it happen is also super important. And ideally, if they can swing it, a risk assessment should be in there.
Okay.
Even better, a back out or rollback plan.
Right.
It's like their plan B in case things go sideways.
Yeah.
Being prepared like that, having that escape route planned out ahead of time, that's the sign of a really mature IT organization.
Right.
And it makes a huge difference in preventing those really long outages.
A rollback plan right off the bat.
Yeah.
Smart move.
It's like a safety net.
Even if it's optional, it seems like a good thing to have. So they've filled out this RFC, packed it with all the crucial info. What happens the second they hit submit?
The very next thing, according to the process model, is that they create a formal change record in the change management system.
Okay.
So it's officially logged and tracked from that point on. That way they have a clear record of all the changes, kind of like an audit trail.
Got it. Request is in the system, all official and everything. Now, who are the folks in charge at this point? Who gets to decide what moves on to the next step?
So that initial assessment, that first check, that lands on the change manager's desk. They're the first line of defense, making sure the requests actually make sense and don't cause any immediate problems.
Okay, so what's the change manager looking at when they get this RFC? What's on their checklist?
They're checking a few key things.
Okay.
First, they want to see if the request is even valid.
Right.
Does it make sense given everything else going on? They also look at the potential impact. How much could this affect the systems and the users? And they assess the risks that come with the change and if it's even possible to do. Can we actually pull this off with the resources and skills we have right now?
And based on this first look, how do they sort the changes? Are there different categories of changes that they handle?
Yeah, the document mentions 3 main types: standard, normal, and emergency. So standard changes, those are your routine, low-risk tasks where they already have approved procedures in place. Think of it like a typical software installation or resetting a password.
Got it.
Normal changes, those need more scrutiny.
Right.
They could have a bigger impact, and they're not your typical standard or emergency thing. And then emergency changes, well, those are all about getting those critical services back up and running ASAP.
Right. Makes sense. So we have a clearer picture now. The change manager has looked it over and put it in a category. What's next? What happens to the RFC?
Well, a few things could happen. The RFC might get accepted and move on to the next stage for more review and approvals. Or if it's missing info or just unclear, it could be returned to the person who sent it.
Okay.
And of course, if it doesn't line up with the business goals or technical priorities, or if it's just too risky, it could be flat out rejected.
So not every change gets the thumbs up. Let's talk about those boards we saw, the CAB and the ECAB. These sound like pretty important groups when it comes to making decisions.
Right.
First, the Change Advisory Board, or a CAB. What's their whole deal?
So the CAB, they're like the review and advisory team for changes.
Oh.
Mainly for the standard and normal changes. Their main job is to really thoroughly vet any proposed changes before they let anyone put them into action. Think of the CAB as a check and balance. It's not just there to be bureaucratic.
Right.
It's about bringing a bunch of smart people together, getting them to look at the change from different angles, to catch anything that might have been missed.
Makes sense. And who are these people in the CAB? Who are these advisors?
Well, the document says they usually have representatives from all sorts of different teams and stakeholders. So that could be people from IT operations, the development team, security, maybe even folks from the business side. Anyone who might be affected by the change or who has a stake in seeing it happen.
So a real mixed bag of people, each with their own point of view.
Yeah.
When the CAB is checking out a change, what's on their criteria list? What are they specifically looking for to give it the okay?
Oh, they consider a lot of factors. It's all laid out in the material we got. They want to know, is there a good business reason for this? And does it fit with our goals? That's the business justification and value.
Right.
They'll also look at the technical feasibility side of things.
Okay.
Can we actually make this happen with the tech and the people we have? Then there's the big one, the risk and impact assessment. What could go wrong, and how can we minimize those risks? They also have to think about whether they have the right people, the budget, and enough time to get it done. That's the resource availability part. They even have to look at if this change will mess with any other changes that are planned or already in progress. So dependencies are important. And of course, they check the implementation and those all-important back-out plans, just to make sure there's a clear path forward and a reliable way to backtrack if they need to.
That is one thorough checklist. Now, how about that other board, the Emergency Change Advisory Board, or ECB? When do they step in? I'm guessing it's when things are really urgent.
Exactly. They come in when there are urgent business or operational needs.
Right.
The document spells it out. Stuff like service outages, security breaches, critical incidents, that sort of thing. Imagine a scenario where a crucial server just crashes in the middle of the night. That's when the ECKB's rapid response team is crucial. These are situations where waiting for the regular CAB to meet and discuss would be a disaster.
Got it. So what's the big difference between how they work and how the regular CAB operates?
Yeah.
I doubt they have time for long meetings when every second counts.
You got it.
Yeah.
They are all about making quick decisions. They need to assess the situation fast and figure out the best way to fix it. The document even says that sometimes they complete the documentation after they've already implemented the change. They're that focused on speed.
Fix it now, document later.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally makes sense in an emergency. So let's say a change has been approved, either by the CAB or the ECA if it was an emergency.
Right.
Now it's time to build the thing. That's where the change builder comes in.
Yeah.
What exactly do they do?
The change builder They handle the technical side of things,
Yeah.
all the technical preparation, development, and construction to actually make the change happen.
Can you give us an example? Like, what would a change builder actually be doing?
Sure, it depends on the kind of change they're making, but they might be developing new software or tweaking existing software. Maybe they're creating automation scripts, which help make sure things are consistent and, reduce those manual errors when they're putting the change in place. Or they could be putting together deployment packages, which have all the necessary files. And sometimes they even set up test environments, like a safe space to try things out before they go live on the real system.
Sounds like they're the ones who get their hands dirty with the technical stuff.
Mm.
Once they've built the change,
Yeah.
what's the next big step before it's let loose on the real system?
That would be the test change phase.
Okay.
And guess who's in charge of that? The change builder.
The goal here is pretty obvious. Right?
Yeah.
Make sure it works as planned and doesn't accidentally break anything else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's all about making sure the change functions as expected, doesn't introduce regressions, like bringing back old bugs or creating new ones,
Right.
and that it meets all the criteria they set out at the beginning.
Okay, so what kinds of tests are they running? It can't just be a quick glance to see if it seems okay, right?
No. There are different levels of testing,
Right.
and different types of testing.
Okay.
They got to be thorough. The document mentions a few. Functional testing to see if it does what it's supposed to. Then integration testing to make sure it plays nice with other systems. Performance or stress testing is important if the change might affect how fast or responsive the system is.
Uh-huh.
And then, of course, there's regression testing to specifically look for those unintended side effects on things that are already working. And sometimes if they need feedback from the actual users before it goes live, they do user acceptance testing, or UAT.
Wow, that's a lot of testing.
Yeah.
What if the tests don't go well? What if things don't meet those criteria?
If the tests fail, the change is put on hold.
Right.
It doesn't go any further. It might go back to the change builder for some rework to fix the problems. Or if the issues are bigger and they need to rethink the whole design, they might do a full reevaluation.
Back to the drawing board. Okay, so let's say it passes all the tests with flying colors. Everything looks great. We're getting close to actually implementing the change. The next step is authorize implementation. Who makes that final call?
So usually it's the change manager who gives the final thumbs up. But for changes that are riskier or have a bigger impact, they might need the CAB to sign off on it too.
Okay.
And for those pre-approved standard changes, it might even happen automatically as part of the workflow.
So even at this late stage, someone's still double-checking before it goes live.
Yeah.
What are they looking at before they give the final go-ahead?
They'll be looking at the test results and any sign-offs they need from testers or users.
Right.
They're also going to review the business and technical impact again, just to make sure nothing's changed and everything still makes sense. They check the change schedule and any planned downtimes to minimize disruption. And they double-check that the rollback plan is ready to go if they need it. And lastly, they make sure everyone's ready to communicate.
Uh-huh.
Are they all set to let the affected people know about the change?
Communication is key, especially when you're changing systems that people rely on every day. The next thing on the list is notify affected users, which is the change manager's job. What info do they need to give the people who might be affected by this change?
That notification is super important.
Yeah.
It manages expectations and keeps people from being surprised or panicking. It needs to say when the change is happening, the planned date and time.
Right.
It explains what the impact might be, if their service is going to be interrupted or anything.
Okay.
They give an estimate of how long the change will take, the duration.
Right.
They provide contact information for support, just in case people have questions. And really important, they tell people what the rollback procedures are so they know what to expect if things go wrong.
Right. So they are giving them a heads up and telling them who to contact if they have problems.
Yeah. And it's also good practice to send out a confirmation once the change is done and everything's working again.
Right. Okay, so now we're at the point where the change actually happens. Implement change.
Hey.
This is where the implementation team takes over, right?
Yes, exactly. They're the ones in charge of actually making the change happen. They take the approved and tested change and deploy it to the live system, carefully following the plan they made.
Okay. What are some specific tasks the implementation team might be doing?
It could be a whole bunch of things, depending on the change. They might be running those pre-written scripts or installation packages, or maybe they're reconfiguring systems, networks, or the underlying infrastructure.
Right.
Sometimes they have to migrate data or update systems. If it involves multiple systems, they'll need to coordinate with other support teams.
Okay.
And most importantly, they have to keep a really close eye on the whole process in real time, monitoring everything to catch any errors or weird behavior right away.
Right.
They also keep the stakeholders updated on how things are going, sticking to the communication plan.
And they absolutely have to stick to that change window we talked about earlier.
Right. To minimize any interruption to the business.
That's super important. Sticking to the authorized change window is crucial. And they need to be ready to roll back the change if something critical pops up.
Yeah.
You know, like we were saying before, they need to have those rollback procedures ready to go.
Right. Speaking of things going wrong, there's actually a step in the process for backing out the change, and the implementation team handles that too.
Right.
When does that happen? I'm hoping it's not very often.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
It's triggered when the implementation just doesn't work, or if some big unexpected issue pops up after they've implemented the change.
Right.
Then they have to go back to the previous stable version to avoid making things worse.
Okay, so what does backing out a change actually involve? What are they doing to reverse it?
Well, the document lists a few things they might have to do. They might need to revert code or configuration changes.
Maybe restore systems from backups or snapshots they took before the change. Sometimes they need to reboot or restart services to get them back to how they were before. And of course, they immediately let everyone know what's happening. They notify the users and support teams about the situation and tell them what they're doing to fix it.
So basically, they're trying to get back to a working state as quickly as possible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Minimize the problems for everyone.
So whether they implemented the change successfully or if they had to back it out, the last step is to conduct a post-implementation review, which is done by the change builder. Why is it so important to look back after everything's done?
The post-implementation review is super important. Yeah. It's all about learning from what happened and making things better in the future. They want to make sure the IT environment stays stable in the long run. They have to ask themselves, did this change actually do what it was supposed to do?
Right.
Did we follow the plan? And really importantly, did it cause any unexpected problems? This stage, it's where the good organizations really stand out. It's not just about checking a box.
Right.
It's about having this attitude of wanting to always improve.
What are they specifically looking at during this post-implementation review?
They look at a lot of things. They compare what actually happened with what they expected to happen.
Okay.
Did the change deliver the benefits they hoped for? They look for any issues or things that didn't go according to plan during and after the implementation. They carefully document what they learned, what went well, what could they have done better. And based on that, they suggest improvements for the future. They also make sure the change record in the system is up to date with all the details, and sometimes they write a report for the stakeholders. And it's important to remember that this review happens even if they had to roll back the change.
Yeah.
That way they can figure out why it failed.
So they can make sure it doesn't happen again.
Exactly.
It's all about constantly getting better, learning from mistakes, and making the whole process smoother, more reliable, and less likely to cause any disruptions. Now, the material you shared also talked about the key people involved in this whole process. Can we do a quick recap of those roles and what they do to bring it all together?
Of course. You have the change initiator, the person who first spots the need for the change and submits the RFC.
Okay.
Then there's the ECA. Those are the ones who make the fast decisions about emergency changes.
Right.
The CAB assesses and approves those standard and normal changes.
Okay.
They take a bit more time with those. The change manager is like the conductor, making sure the change moves through the process correctly and following the rules.
Okay.
The change builder is the one who actually builds and tests the technical parts of the change.
Yeah.
And the implementation team puts the approved change on the live system and also handles any rollbacks if things go wrong.
It really is a team effort.
Definitely.
Everyone has their part to play. It's very structured, designed for control.
Exactly. The whole point of this system is to have that structure.
Yeah.
To manage IT changes in a way that lets things progress and change, but also keeps those IT services stable and reliable and secure.
Right.
So they don't disrupt the business or the people who use those services.
Right.
It's all about control and being able to track every step of the way.
Well, this has been a really interesting look into how IT changes are managed. It's a whole process that most people don't even think about.
Yeah.
Looking at this framework, it makes you wonder what the biggest challenge might be.
Yeah.
Like, in the real world, how hard is it to put this kind of process in place and stick to it in an IT environment? Or even think bigger. How could you take these principles of managing changes and use them for other complex systems or big projects?
Yeah.
Not just in IT. It's really something to think about.
Thank you for listening to ProcessCast. This episode was brought to you by HEFLO, the BPM platform that empowers businesses to document, automate, and optimize their processes with AI. Experience the intelligence to simplify complex business processes and accelerate your growth with our complete management solution. Visit heflo.com to learn more. Be sure to follow ProcessCast for more insights on business process management, and don't forget to share this episode with your network. Until next time.